So, welcome back, children. In the previous video, children, we studied how Dr. Sadao and his wife Hannah were in amazement when they saw the dying soldier near the seashore. They were not sure what to do with him, but later on, they were motivated by their feeling of human beingness that they carried the soldier to their house. Then the question came, how to save the enemy soldier? Who will wash the enemy soldier? Hannah said that the servant Yumi can wash. But then Sadao got busy in checking the pulse because he was more worried about saving the life of this white man. This man must have extraordinary vitality, or he would have been dead by now. But then he was very young, perhaps not even 25. You mean die from the operation? Hannah asked. Yes, Sadao said. Hannah considered this doubtfully, and when she did not answer, Sadao turned away. At any rate, something must be done with him, he said, and first, he must be washed. He went quickly out of the room, and Hannah came behind him. She did not wish to be left alone with the white man. He was the first she had seen since she left America, and now he seemed to have nothing to do with those whom she had known there. Here he was her enemy, a menace, living or dead. A thought came in Hannah's mind. Why not the soldier die on the operation table? In this way, we will be satisfying our the feeling of being human, and we will also act as nationalist. See, children, when some typical situation comes in front of us, positive as well as negative thoughts come in our brain, and then it's our choice which one to act upon. So the pallor of the unconscious man's face moved him first, stoop and feel his pulse. It was faint, but it was there. Means the pulse of the soldier was very faint, but it was there. Sadao put his hand against the man's cold breast. The heart too was yet alive. And Sadao observed that he would die unless operated. The man was very young, perhaps not even 25. The man had to be washed first. However, the servants, I think, will refuse to do so. Hannah did not see any American since she left America. So this man was the first one. Hannah turned to the nursery and called Yumi, but the children heard her voice and she had to go in for a moment and smile at them and play with the baby boy, now nearly 3 months old. Over the baby's soft black hair, she motioned with her mouth. Yumi, come with me. I'll put the baby to bed, Yumi replied. He is ready. She went with Yumi into the bedroom next to the nursery and stood with the boy in her arms, while Yumi spread the sleeping quilts on the floor and laid the baby between them. So Hannah called the servant Yumi, but actually she was with the children. Then Hannah led the way quickly and softly to the kitchen. The two servants were frightened at what their master had just told them. The old gardener, who was also a house servant, pulled a few hairs on his upper lips. So Hannah and Sadao had told their servants that there's an American soldier inside, and they were all shocked and surprised. Now see what they are thinking. The master ought not to heal the wound of this white man, he said bluntly to Hannah. The white man ought to be die. First he was shot, then the sea caught him and wounded him with the rocks. If the master heals what the gun did and what the sea did, they will take revenge on us. See how the servants said their viewpoint. They said that the white man who was wounded by the gunshot, who was wounded by the rocks, if we will let him alive, then the gunshot and the rocks would take revenge from us. In fact, in a different way, the servants said what they want, but actually, they did not want that he should be treated. I will tell him what you say, Hannah replied courteously. But she herself was also frightened, although she was not superstitious as the old man was. Could it be ever be well to help an enemy? Nevertheless, she told Yumi to fetch the hot water and bring it to the room where the white man was. She went ahead and slid back the partitions. Sadao was not there. Yumi, following, put down her wooden bucket. Then she went over to the white man. When she saw him, her thick lips folded themselves into stubbornness. I have never washed a white man, she said, and I will not wash so dirty a one new. Hannah cried her severely. You will do what your master commands you. There was so fierce a look of resistance upon Yumi's round dull face that Hannah felt unreasonably afraid. After all, if the servants should report something that was not as it happened. So, Yumi was asked by Hannah to wash the American soldier. But what Yumi said, I have never washed a white man, and I will not wash such a dirty man. So Hannah cried more loudly than Yumi. You have to do what your master commands. But in the meantime, Hannah was also afraid. What if these servants tell or report something to the authority? Very well, she said with dignity. You understand, we only want to bring him to his senses so that we can turn him out as a prisoner. I will have nothing to do with it, Yumi said. I'm a poor person. That's not my business. Then please, Hannah said gently, return to your work. At once, Yumi left the room. But this left Hannah with the white man alone. She might have been too afraid to stay had not her anger at Yumi's summons now sustained her. So Yumi refused to wash the American soldier. So Hannah ordered her to get back to her work. Hannah said to her also that we are just treating the white man so that he comes back to the consciousness and so that we hand him over to the police. Just so that Yumi could say yes, but Yumi did not treat the wounds or clean the wounds of the American soldier. Stupid Yumi, she muttered fiercely. Is this anything but a man and a wounded helpless man? In the conviction of her own superiority, she bent impulsively and untied the knotted rugs that kept the white man covered. When she had his breast bare, she dipped the small clean towel that Yumi had brought into the steaming hot water and washed his face carefully. The man's skin, though rough with exposure, was of a fine texture and must have been very blonde, and he was a child. So at last, children, as you can see, Hannah himself had to wash the white man because Yumi had refused. Now, while she was thinking these thoughts, though not really like the man better now, he was no longer a child. She kept on washing him until his upper body was quite clean. But she dared not turn him over. Where was Sadao? Now her anger was ebbing, and she was anxious again, and she rose, whipping her hands on the wrong towel. Then, lest the man be chilled, she put the quilt over him. Sadao, she called softly. He had been about to come in, and when she called, his hand had been on the door, and now he opened it. She saw that he had brought his surgeon's emergency bag and that he wore his surgeon's coat. You have decided to operate? She cried. Yes, he said shortly. He turned his back to her and folded a sterilized towel upon the floor of the Tokonama alcove and put instruments out upon it. Fetch towels, he said. Now Hannah, was getting angry at Sadao. Where is he? Where is he? Suddenly Sadao came there with his surgeon's bag. and he wanted to operate. And Hannah asked, "Have you decided to operate?" Sadao said, "Yes. Bring the towels." She went obediently, but now anxious, to the linen shelves and took out the towels. There ought also to be old pieces of matting so that the blood would not ruin the fine floor covering. She went out to the back veranda where the gardener kept strips of matting with which to protect delicate shrubs on cold nights, and took an armful of them. But when she went back into the room, she saw this was useless. The blood had already soaked to the packing in the man's wound and had ruined the mat under him. "Oh, the mat!" she cried. "Yes, it is ruined," Sadao replied, as though he did not care. "Help me in turn," he commanded her. She obeyed him without a word, and he began to wash the man's back carefully. Yumi would not wash him, she said. "Did you wash him then?" Sadao asked, not stopping for a moment his swift, concise movements. So now Sadao had started operating the enemy soldier, and he was surprised to know that Yumi refused to wash the American soldier, and Hannah himself had to wash the American soldier. He did not seem to hear her, but she was used to his absorption, and when he was at work, she wondered for a moment if it mattered to him. What was the body upon which he worked so long as it was for the work? He did so excellently. "You will have to give the anesthetic if he needs it," he said. "I," she repeated blankly. "But never have I." "It is easy enough," he said impatiently. He was taking out the packing now, and the blood began to flow more quickly. He peered into the wound with the bright surgeon's light fastened on his forehead. "The bullet is still there," he said with cool interest. "Now I wonder how deep this rock wound is. It is not too deep. It may be that I can get the bullet." Sadao had started his work, and he removed the packing of moss, and suddenly blood started flowing. Then he saw that there is a bullet inside it, and due to it, the wound is bleeding. Sadao said, "The bullet is inside the body, but the bleeding is not superficial. He has lost much blood." At this moment, Hannah choked. He looked up and saw her face, the color of sulfur. "Don't faint," he said sharply. He did not put down his exploring instrument. "If I stop now, the man will surely die." She clapped her hands to her mouth and leaped up and ran out of the room. Outside in the garden, he heard her retching, but he went on with his work. It will be better for her to empty her stomach, he thought. He had forgotten that, of course, she had never seen an operation, but her distress and his inability to go to her at once made him impatient and irritable with his man, who lay like dead under his knife. So Sadao has started the operation, and by seeing the blood and other things, Hannah started retching. Retching here means puking, vomiting. And Sadao was such a nice doctor that he could not leave his patient, although he knew that Hannah is emptying her stomach, because he knew that if he would move away from there, the man under his knife would certainly die. This man, he thought, there is no reason under heaven why he should live. Unconsciously, this thought made him ruthless, and he proceeded swiftly. In his dream, the man moaned, but Sadao paid no heed except to mutter at him. "Groan," he muttered, "groan if you like. I am not doing this on my own pleasure. In fact, I do not know why I am doing it." The doors opened, and there was Hannah again. "Where is the anesthetic?" she asked in a clear voice. Sadao motioned with his chin. "It is as well that you come back," he said. "This fellow is beginning to stir." She had the bottle and some cotton in her hand. "But how shall I do it?" she asked. So now, as Sadao was trying to take out the bullet, the man groaned, means the American soldier cried. Now, Sadao said, "You cry. You cry as much you want to cry. I'm not going to stop. I'm not doing it for myself. It's for you only. I want to save your life." Actually, these words were superficial. In fact, a struggle was going on between a doctor and a nationalist. Till that time, Hannah had come back and she was all right. And then she asked, "Where's the anesthetic?" And Sadao motioned with his chin that it's there. And then Hannah asked, "How will I apply it?" So Sadao said, "Simply saturate the cotton and hold it near his nostrils." Sadao replied without delaying for one moment in the intricate detail of his work. "When he breathes badly, move it away a little." She crouched close to the sleeping face of the young American. It was piteously thin face, she thought, and the lips were twisted. The man was suffering, whether he knew it or not. Watching him, she wondered if the stories they heard sometimes of the sufferings of prisoners were true. They came like flickers of rumor, told by word of mouth and always contradicted. In the newspaper, the reports were always that wherever the Japanese armies went, the people received them gladly, with cries of joy at their liberation. But sometimes she remembered such men as General Takima, who at home beat his wife cruelly. So, Sadao told Hannah that she could wet the cotton with the anesthetic and put close to the nostrils of the patient. And when he breathes heavily, move away the cotton. Then she thought about various stories of Japanese soldier, that how they are greeted gladly and happily at every places. But General Takima, who was the general of Japanese army, was known for his cruelty because he used to beat his wife. If a man like that could be so cruel to a woman in his power, would he not be cruel to one like this, for instance? She hoped anxiously. And this young man had not been tortured. It was at this moment that she observed deep red scars on his neck, just under the ear. "Those scars," she murmured, lifting her eyes to Sadao. But he did not answer. At this moment, he felt the tip of his instrument strike against something hard, dangerously. So, Hannah thought that General was very cruel to his wife. If he is cruel to his wife, what he will do with this soldier? Suddenly, Hannah noticed some cut marks on the neck of the soldier under the ear. She reported it to Dr. Sadao, but he was busy because something hard struck dangerously near the kidney. He felt out the purest pleasure. He probed with his fingers, delicately, familiar with every atom of this human body. His old American professor of anatomy has seen to that knowledge. Ignorance of the human body is a surgeon's cardinal sin, sirs. He had thundered at his class years after year. To operate without as complete knowledge of the body as if you had made it anything else than that is murder. So Dr. Sadao had pointed out or figured out the existence of bullet near the kidney of that soldier. And he now remembered the words of his professor, who said that operating a patient without complete knowledge of anatomy is just like doing a murder. "It is not quite at the kidney, my friend," Sadao murmured. It was his habit to murmur to the patient when he forgot himself in an operation. "My friend," he always called his patients, and so now he did, forgetting that this was his enemy. Then quickly, with the cleanest and most precise of incisions, the bullet was out. The man quivered, but he was still unconscious. Nevertheless, he muttered a few English words. "Guts," he muttered, choking. "They got my guts." "Sadao," Hannah cried sharply. "Hush," Sadao said. The man sank again into silence, so profound that Sadao took up his wrist, hating the touch of it. Yes, there was still a pulse, so faint, so feeble, but enough he wanted. If he wanted the man to live, to give hope. So Sadao had observed the existence of bullet, and with his skillful hands, he removed the bullet. The pulse was still there. It means the man will live. But certainly I don't want this man to live, he thought. No more anesthetic, he told Hannah. He turned as swiftly as though he had never paused, and from his medicines, he chose a small vial and from it filled a hypodermic and thrust it into the patient's left arm. Then, putting down the needle, he took the man's wrists again. The pulse under his fingers fluttered once or twice and then grew stronger. This man will live in spite of all, he said to Hannah and sighed. The young man woke, so weak, his blue eyes so terrified. So it means Dr. Sadao had already removed the bullet from his body. He injected a syringe and then he was quite sure that this man will live. That is, the man is going to survive. So children, that's all in this part of video. Next will be continued in forthcoming video.